Hello everyone and welcome to day one of Growth Week. We've got a fantastic opportunity today to talk about a really important sort of topic around gaining insights for Agri-Tech businesses and gaining insights into industry expectations and industry opportunities. And so I'm really pleased today to have Louisa and Emily join us to really give us an insight into one of the leading UK innovative food organisations, Noble Foods. Now, Noble Foods have a long history, beginning their trading in 1920 and being one of the leading suppliers of fresh food brands to consumers and retailers alike. So we will get into the discussion with Louisa and Emily just shortly. But yes, welcome to Growth Week. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Helen Brookes. I'm the Director of Engagement here for the UK Agri-Tech Centre. And as I already said, I'm with Louisa and Emily from Noble Foods. So first off, Louisa and Emily, can I just get you to introduce yourself to the audience and give us a little bit about yourself and your role at Noble Foods, please? Louisa, could I come to you first?
Hi, I'm Louisa and I am the Chief People and Impact Officer here at Noble. So my role at Noble Foods is part of the leadership team and also the board in driving everything culture, impact, and also digital and IT in our business. So quite wide ranging, but what we're here today to talk around probably leads mostly into the impact and culture side of what we do.
Thanks, Louisa. Emily, for yourself as well.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Emily Marshall, Agri Sustainability Manager at Noble. Been here just coming up 2 years. It kind of is what it says in the title. I lead everything from an agri sustainability perspective, but also look after the relationship with our retail customers from an agri strategy point of view. So a lot of what we're talking about today kind of funnels through in terms of communication to our customers. So hopefully we'll get a little bit of insight into that as we go through the conversation too.
Brilliant. Thanks both. So from a UK Agri-Tech sort of perspective, our focus and direction is really to support Agri-Tech businesses to commercialise and to develop products and services that can be utilised by end users, farmers, growers, predominantly, but across the whole supply chain. But to ensure that we can do that, we need to make sure that we work in partnership with the whole of the value chain across agriculture. And so I suppose from my first question, I'll come to you first, Louisa, is where does Agri-Tech sit in terms of Noble Foods from a strategy point?
I think we'd probably start very much rooted in our purpose. Our purpose as an organisation is to better nourish people, animals and planet. And so to do certainly the animals and planet side, Agri-Tech would be part of that jigsaw puzzle. We set out our impact strategy a couple of years ago now. So we've got some bold ambitions up leading all the way through to 2050. And for us, as we're looking strategically as how we meet some of these milestones, albeit we probably won't be here in 2050 to see them, what's really important for us is knowing that every year we've actually made a step towards that. So we're very clear in setting some really tangible, measurable actions that we complete every year that take us towards the impact strategy, and the Agri-Tech related activities have formed part of those as we look forward into the future.
Is there anything within that look towards 2050 that you can really pinpoint an association with Agri-Tech, or is it an undercurrent, a thematic going through that?
It's probably an undercurrent that touches everything, but I suppose in particular, if you think about our SBTi targets from a carbon point of view, we've got some big carbon reductions to make, be that in scope 1 and 2, or most of them, as people within agriculture will know, sit in scope 3 and our raw materials. So I think that's going to be a key one that collectively we need to work forward to see how we can reduce the carbon. And then secondly, the work that we do with nature, biodiversity and animal welfare. So really exciting developments that we've already seen and been part of that will help us make sure that we can better care for animals and the planet.
Quite often, when the term Agri-Tech is used, people specifically go to those sort of gadgets and gizmos and tools and platforms and the data, all of which is extremely important. And certainly, robotics and automation, advanced sensors, AI data systems are very much focal areas for the UK Agri-Tech Centre. But from a strategic level, how does Noble Foods really think about Agri-Tech, and what sort of that broader view and broader structures that can make up Agri-Tech from a Noble Foods perspective?
Gosh, it's so wide ranging. I think you probably captured most of the points just in your introduction to that question. I think we see it to leverage information so we can better inform the people we're working with and ourselves how to do a better job and learn from each other. So certainly, I think technology helps us cut through a lot of the noise and see some of the answers and be able to share amongst each other more efficiently and effectively. Then from a monitoring, listening, using some of the AI to look more proactively rather than reactively. So a lot of farming in particular would react to a pest or react to a certain condition on farm, but to use technology to be more proactive. And I guess even looking at data and looking at how we manage flocks and how we manage some of our relationships, being on the front foot, not the back foot, is going to be how you're going to win in the future.
You mentioned data, and obviously in your introduction you talked about your role with IT as well. From a data point of view, are there any sort of real technology advancements that you would consider have supported Noble Foods' use of data for the benefit of your customers and your suppliers?
I'd say we're on the journey of that. We've got lots of exciting things in the pipeline, lots of activity underway, and Emily's smiling. She's been involved in many of those discussions. We know where we want to get to, but we've got a lot of work to do to get there. Ultimately, for us, the key to our technology journey is to bring all of our data together so we can use it in a joined up way. As you can imagine, you mentioned we've been in business since 1920. Systems and processes evolve over decades and decades, and so do farm names and farm codes. And we have multiple different facets of our business. And so just to be able to join it up and use our data efficiently is our number one stop on our transformational journey. But we know as soon as we've done that, we can fast track with using some of those AI tools and some of the tools that we see coming through with innovation to really leverage that data.
It's really great to hear that big companies such as Noble Foods are evolving continuously, and it's something that has to happen to meet the requirements that are coming down through government, through policy, through legislation, but also through culture, through people and society as well. So a real sort of evolution movement there. And probably more from a sort of a personal point of view, but how does your role, Louisa, really connect to the Agri-Tech decisions that are made within the business? And Emily, I'll ask the same question to you.
I suppose I'm that voice in the leadership team and as the board in terms of the sponsor. We get quite excited with some of the things we see. I think not to steal Emily's thunder, some of the things she's going to talk to you about later. When I saw it, we were really got excited around the data and what we could see, and slightly geeky about it. I'd use that term. So there's a personal interest, a personal drive, but just being that voice to the leadership team, and I think a conscience constantly with the leadership team and the board that we're delivering on commitments we've made against our impact strategy. We set out our objectives every year, but just making sure we've got that drumbeat and we're constantly achieving those is a pretty full-time job.
And Emily, what about your role? How do you connect with those Agri-Tech decisions for the business?
So I'm probably the first point of contact, I would say. So generally, it tends to be that I would kind of screen ideas. So like Louisa said, the direction's been set. Everybody's very clear where we're going. I know that my part is to work towards that, and it's trying to find things that I think can help us get to where we need to be. So I would tend to have those initial conversations, and then if it's something that I think has grounds, then it's for me to try and raise that within the business and get the sign off. And that's where having people like Louisa is really helpful, because if we get excited about an idea, there's somebody at board level that can take those ideas forward and get the sign off that we do need.
So Emily, coming to you, in terms of the drivers that you feel for really utilising new technologies for agriculture as a whole, but also that vision of Noble, how how does that look to you, or what does that look like to you?
So I think the first thing is probably, I mean, Louisa's already alluded to it. Obviously, we have got some really ambitious targets. We've got lots around sustainability, not just carbon, which has already been mentioned, but we know that through our work with retailers, we need to be looking at nature, biodiversity, and water as well. So I think a lot of the kind of agri-tech technologies that we see, I've got in the back of my mind, how could that help us deliver against one of those pillars that we need to work towards? I also think there's obviously an issue with recruitment and bringing young people into agriculture at the moment. So I think thinking about future-proofing our farm resilience, I'm kind of aware that ag tech will probably be playing a major part in that as well. So that's another point to consider. And then obviously welfare, we're a business that's founded on animals. So it's a massive part of our impact strategy, and we want to be known as leaders in welfare. So when we hear of novel or interesting technology that will help us advance our already good position on welfare, that's something that's really exciting to us and tends to get us kind of wanting to progress.
Yeah, no, fab. And you mentioned there, obviously, from a sustainability point of view, carbon, nature, biodiversity, and water. Are there maybe a couple of examples that you can give us sort of right now that can illustrate how you are working with the Agri-Tech businesses to move forward in Agri-Tech and to utilise that across your supply pools?
Yeah, so two examples that I can talk about. First one is Agri-Sound. So that would firmly sit within the nature and biodiversity pillar. And it's bioacoustic technologies. It's basically a box called a poly that goes onto our ranges, and it sits and listens to the wing beat frequency of the pollinators that come past. So I can then log on remotely to a dashboard and see every single one of our devices situated right from Scotland to Sussex, and see which farm has the highest level of pollinators, which individual unit has supported the most biodiversity. And so, for example, by having each of the units situated in a different habitat, we can then start to draw conclusions about which habitat is promoting the most or the highest levels of biodiversity on our farm, and then start to think, for example, okay, well, if that wildflower meadow is supporting pollinators in early spring, but young trees is better in late autumn, how can we replicate that habitat on other areas or other sites to continue with the progress that we're seeing? So Agri-Sound, we're already a very well established business. They work with lots of major retailers and other food processors, but we were aware that they weren't already working in the egg industry. And when I moved to the business, I thought we have a perfect opportunity here, because the majority of our production is free range and organic. And unlike other intensive industries like broilers or pigs, for example, we have a huge range area, and we should be doing more with it. So we started thinking about how we can really quantify the work that we'd already started as part of our impact strategy to improve biodiversity and nature on farm. And Agri-Sound was the perfect fit for that. So it's great to have that quantification available to us. And it's also something tangible that we can take to our retail customers in terms of a project. So it's been really nice, because we always joke in the business that I'm the bee lady. And I always say everybody loves to talk about the bees, because I appreciate it's very niche, but people actually do get really excited about it. And our retail customers get excited about it as well, because it's cool and it's something nice to talk about, but also has a tangible benefit in terms of that baseline measurement. I've actually been really heartened by how many of our farmers that have these devices on farm have been really interested in it. So I've sent reports out to each of them, and they have loved the detail, and they've asked so many questions. And that kind of piece about bringing people with us has been really nice. But then, yes, in terms of tangible data points, we have got actions that we can start implementing in the spring that then hopefully in the next year we'll be able to see the benefit that we've created from those actions. I actually knew Casey from a previous role. I guess I was aware of him from that role, but also aware of him from the great PR that they have within the industry, LinkedIn, places like that. I'm kind of very aware of the business. So I guess that's one hint, is make sure that if you're a startup and you're trying to get into this space, don't be scared to use social media. And then that's obviously evolved into Casey being introduced to my marketing colleagues and other people within our agriculture team to build the working relationship.
And that really does signal the power of our networks and networking as well. You mentioned in your sort of preamble around using AgriSound about it having tangible outputs for retailers. Can you maybe just expand on that? So what are retailers looking for when you approach them? And the fact that you said tangible is really interesting to me.
I mean, what are they looking for? That is the $1 million question. I think a lot of the time people don't know what they're looking for. I mean, people have, well, everybody, if you look at the retail space, everyone's moving in the same direction, and that would be the same direction as us. Everyone's got science-based targets. Everyone is aware of things like TNFD and all the various nature disclosures that are coming down the line. And I think everybody's thinking, how do we do this? We don't know how to do it by ourselves. So I couldn't give you, for example, a time where a retailer has said to me, I want to know X about your specific supply chain. For example, they wouldn't say, I want to know how many bees you have on your site. But what they would do is say to me, we have a nature strategy, Emily, and we need to be able to evidence that we're progressing towards our targets or reduce our impacts on nature. How can you, as Noble Foods, help us in that? And then as the supplier to retail, we tend to have the autonomy to figure out how that could work. So in terms of the quantifications that we talked about, I've shared with them the output of the AgriSound work. And I think, to be honest, the retailers are happy to just leave us to do that work because they can see that we are doing it. It's reasonably flexible, I think, and that's where it's exciting, because there is a lot of opportunity in this space for Agri-Tech and new innovations to come in, because nobody really knows the answer or knows how any of us are going to get there yet. We're just trying our best to work in the right direction.
Having a challenge area that we want to address, knowing that a change needs to be made, is a real. It has to happen before we can really start to identify those solutions. Is that something that you've seen or you've been challenged on yourself?
We tend to find, especially in this kind of agri-tech kind of sustainability space within retail, that they have big teams that are working on things like sustainability targets, but getting the commercial buy-in from the people that ultimately look after the categories, that's the tricky bit. And so whilst obviously everybody does want to do the right thing, having something like a framework come down the line from the EU or from the UK government helps my colleagues be able to kind of quantify the benefit to their colleagues and prove why we should be investing money in certain technologies or moving towards a certain goal. So it helps. But then there are also things that they will look at that doesn't have to be kind of compliance related. It just depends on the amount of funding that we're talking about and the kind of scale of the problem, I think.
And was there a second example that you were going to?
The second example is a technology called TerraMap. TerraMap is owned by Hutchinson's, who are an agronomy company. The easiest way that I have tried to explain this internally is you either have an ATV or a quad bike, and it has a magic crystal on the front in a big tube, and it goes along and scans the soil surface. And it boggles my mind how they get from that big crystal scanning the soil to the information that we get out of it. But effectively, it gives us multiple different parameters, including soil health indices, phosphorus and nitrogen levels in the soil. It tells us the amount of carbon stored in terms of organic matter and in terms of carbon per ton stored. And the amount of information that it gives us is honestly amazing. But it, again, along the same trend as AgriSound, having that data then enables us to set a baseline and work towards our targets and make improvements and then quantify the benefit that it's given. So to kind of summarize what TerraMap is to us, it's our soil health platform. And yeah, it's been fantastic working with the Hutchinson's team. They're already very well established in the agronomy space. So I think that made it a lot easier for us. New to hens, I believe, but yeah, an established technology.
Yeah, indeed. Expanding technology across different sectors is, that's an area that we are focusing on as well, to go, okay, can we get the best market input or the best market opportunity for this technology across hens, across dairy, across arable, across, as many different sectors as possible, so that technology can really have the impact. We've talked about two really positive examples with AgriSound and Hutchinson's where you have and are working with them very closely. But are there any reasons maybe that conversations don't always progress with Agri-Tech businesses for yourselves, Noble?
I can't think of an example. I think unless the idea was absolutely crazy, I don't see why we wouldn't take a first meeting. We're always open to ideas. We don't know what we don't know. Like Louisa, my job is so varied that I'm kind of jack of all trades, master of none. So if there are new examples of things that, like you said, come from a different sector, I'm always very open to hear about it, because we often don't, we don't know what, for example, might be happening in broilers that could be brought across into the laying industry, or what's happening in pigs that could also come across. The only reasons that I could think that it would be a downright no, or things might not progress beyond the first conversation, is probably lack of scalability. So it might be that there's something is a fantastic idea, but it's going to take 5 years to actually get off the ground. There might be instances where it's worth it and we would continue those conversations, but I think that one would be 5 years to us is a really long time, and we need to be starting work now. So the scalability issue would be a big one. I think the other one, obviously, cost of uptake. Obviously, if there's ways through, for example, Innovate UK, that we could access joint funding, then that could be an option. But if, for example, it's going to cost tens of thousands of pounds to put new technology into every single shed, it's going to be a no. I think people always see big integrated businesses and assume that there's an open checkbook, but we work to tight budgets too. So that one is we always have to take that into account. And then probably the third point would be how much disruption that technology would cause to our operation. So, for example, if I think about a laying shed, we have farms teams that work specifically on those farms, and their job is to look after the birds and make sure that production is where it should be. We might find a fantastic technology, but if it takes that farm team 2 days a week to look after it, it's not going to happen unless we could prove that it's worth employing extra staff, which, again, probably unlikely. But like I said, coming back to the positives, we would always take a first conversation with someone. So I would never be afraid to reach out via LinkedIn or through another means, conferences, Agri-Tech centres, to try and talk to us, because we like to hear what people are thinking about in the industry.
Something you mentioned quite early on is being really super clear as to what's the problem they're solving with their Agri-Tech, because there's lots of great ideas, but what's the real purpose of it? What's the real benefit that we would see. And I think just being super clear on that at the outset is what would make us say, yes, come and talk to us. It can look cool, but it needs to have a purpose.
Yeah, completely agree, completely. And from what you were both saying, sort of the three things I just wrote down were return on investment, consistency, and minimizing disruption to productivity seem to be three key areas that I've got from the conversation so far. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that, maybe in terms of consistency itself?
Well, Emily used the word scalable. So again, being in the, it needs to be consistent at a scale. So being able to be used across different sizes, shapes, geographies, territories.
Yeah, and in terms of that feedback loop of, you know, when you say, right, yeah, there's a problem and this is the solution, and we're going to implement it across, you know, X amount of our production farms. You know, are the people that are, like you say, working in the sheds, you know, looking after the poultry with the welfare, are they very keen to give you feedback on that sort of Agri-Tech installation when that comes through, and how does that work?
This was a point that I did think about raising actually before we started recording this podcast. I do think that who looks after the technology or who looks after the trial is a major thing that we need to think about, or ag tech companies need to think about. So if I use an example of a feed additive, for example, a technology to a degree, we try lots of different feed additives within the business, but expecting somebody within the Noble team to look at, for example, the difference in feed conversion or the difference in egg profile, we don't have the expertise in analysing data. Whereas if the company that has supplied us that product has the expertise and they take over control of that, it makes our life so much easier, or in particular my life, because it means I can speak to them. They can say, yeah, it's worked, or no, it hasn't, or look at this interesting finding. And then I can take that snippet of information straight back to the rest of the ag team, have an informed conversation with them about it, and then we're sorted. So I think for an ag tech company that's trying to work with an integrator, it's really important that they think about how they're going to support that project and don't assume that they've kind of handed it over and that's the end of it.
Unless the Agri-Tech is around data, because I think one of the biggest benefits to organizations in the future is around the quality of your data and that IP. So I know that some of the things that we've looked at in the past, even going back 5 years, is if we as a business can't own that data and control that data, that's a bit of a red line for us, because we don't want to do all the hard work, all of the investment for somebody else to have the data benefit and the IP. So it depends on the project, and they're all different. But certainly when you've got data heavy technologies, our point of difference for using that, we'd want to be an advantage to us, not a crowdsource data pool that everyone can benefit from.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and one that certainly isn't just specific to Noble Foods, but a really good point across the industry as well. And just coming back to your point, Emily, what I was sort of feeling from you there is obviously you need that support through the Agri-Tech. So how you know, collaborations that would fit into that area as well? So instead of just that one-to-one, but almost like that partnership opportunity that can come knocking.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's kind of sitting down at the beginning of the project and saying, okay, well, what outputs do we want from this? What are our measures that we're going to make a decision on? How can we get them? And whether that's through, for example, the support of yourselves at Agri-Tech centres or from an independent consultant or somebody else, there's no issue with bringing in multiple parties to the same project. As long as there's, I think, having one kind of project management point of contact between, for example, us and the external project team is helpful. But yeah, certainly no issues with multiple people being involved, as long as there's the kind of confidentiality side of it taken care of.
So let's think about some of those, you know, potential barriers and opportunities, because I like to have a silver lining and think about things that are barriers can also create opportunities. So what are some of those opportunities, or what is some of that advice that you would both sort of give over to an Agri-Tech business?
One word that I've just written down is communication. And obviously that's really multifaceted, but I think one thing that's a really important part of my job is being able to communicate our projects, firstly to get sign off, but then also with our customers. And if our customers get really excited by it, so the retailers, if they're really excited by a potential project, it gives the project so many more legs than if they're not. So I think a company being able to come to us with a really clear, a strap line is a little bit cheesy, but kind of really clear idea of what the project delivers in really simple terms, not assuming that anybody that's going to be reading it is an expert in the field. I think that is a huge tick in the box, because it makes everybody else's life easier. So that slightly left field, but that's going to be my one contribution into this.
I was going to say something probably quite similar in terms of solve a real problem and make it easy for us to sell it, and where possible do that in the most commercially advantageous way for all parties as we can. I think there's not tons of money in the sector to really drive forward some of those innovations. So think creatively as to how you might be able to do a trial, what partnerships you can use to get it going. Like Emily said, we unfortunately don't have blank checkbooks, so it's hard to get behind all of these ideas. But if you've got a real problem that you're solving and an innovative way that we can look at doing that together, then I think you'd have a lot of people that were prepared to sit and listen and have a go.
I think exclusivity goes a really long way as well. So we talked specifically about the egg sector. Obviously, we are in a competitive market and we have multiple competitors. If we are going to invest our time into working with an ag tech company, it really helps me be able to get buy-in if I can say, well, there's an exclusivity period and we're developing this, and we know that we'll be first to market and therefore be able to sell that story to our retail customers. So if it is possible to offer that, I always think it helps to get people on board in the first place.
Yeah, I love that point you just said about telling the story. That completely links in with your communication piece as well. You have to be able to tell the story just as much as your customer has to be able to tell the story to their end customer as well. So just one final question. I love a final killer question. In terms of the next 5 years or the next 10 years, what is something that you are most excited about?
Emily's not allowed to say anything about bees, but
we love them.
I'm going to go first just in case you got the same answer. For me, it's around leveraging data to move from that reactive to proactive is going to be the biggest step change, hopefully not as far away as 5 years time, but really getting data driven farming execution is going to hopefully change the game for us, for our producers, but also for the end consumer.
And I'm going to pretty much echo what Louisa said. I think AI is, it's not really a shock to anyone. AI has grown massively, even in the last year. And I feel like there will be so much that comes down the line in terms of how we implement that and how we can use that on farm that saves the farm staff time, improves welfare and contributes towards sustainability. And then my little side one, and my little favourite project would be all around nature. I think it's this was probably carbon 5-10 years ago. Now everyone's starting to talk more about nature. And so I can see that there's a lot of opportunity there because nobody knows the answer. So hopefully there'll be a lot of ag tech companies that come through the pipework to help us solve that problem.
Fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much to both of you for taking the time to talk to me today. It's really been extremely insightful to understand your roles and the role of Noble Foods in terms of really driving Agri-Tech through to commercialisation. Thank you very much, Louisa and Emily, and take care. Bye-bye.